All right, we're going to get started here in a second. Okay, it is officially 7 o'clock. Greetings and peace be upon you all. How's the microphone? I know it's loud, but is it okay? All right. Well, greetings and peace be upon you all. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Muhammad Khalil, or Mohammed Khalil, and I'm the director of the MSU Muslim Studies program, as well as a professor of religious studies right here at Michigan State University. I'm truly to welcome you all to our third annual Malcolm X Muslim Studies Community Forum, featuring this year Mr. Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf. I want to thank you all for making it out here despite the weather. We had a snow day for the local schools. We have a fog advisory apparently coming up in an hour. I want to thank you for being here. By the way, people ask me, why do you hold this in late January? Here's why. Well, actually, I'll tell you why, and give me 1 minute. I'll tell you why. There's a historical reason. And I want to thank those of you joining by live stream as well on our YouTube page. At the outset, let us take a moment to reflect on the significance of this space. First of all, we are in the ancestral and contemporary lands of the Anishinaabe Three Fires Confederacy of Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi peoples. And 9 decades ago, Malcolm X, then Malcolm Little, grew up right here in the greater Lansing area. As for this very room, and by the way, earlier today we took a tour of some key landmarks in Malcolm X's life in Lansing and in Mason. You can actually visit them today. I would encourage all of you to check it out. As for this very room, exactly, when I say exactly, I mean exactly, 61 years ago to the day, on January 23, 1963, Malcolm X stood right here and spoke to an audience sitting where many of you are sitting. So that's why we usually aim for late January. Right around the same time Malcolm X spoke here. And by the way, I looked at the weather that day. The weather that day was really bad. Apparently the high was 6 degrees, the low was -12. It was snowing. So we're getting the full experience. Here to reflect on the fascinating and multifaceted legacy of Malcolm X, Al-Hajj Malik al-Shabazz. There are many aspects of his legacy, including the Muslim aspect. As Malcolm X's wife, the late Dr. Betty Shabazz, told Imam Zaid Shakir, our first Malcolm X speaker, the nationalists have claimed Malcolm. The socialists have claimed Malcolm. It's time for you Muslims to claim Malcolm. And we're honored to have an influential Muslim with us as we collectively reflect on Malcolm's legacy. At this time, I'm delighted to invite MSU Vice President and Chief Diversity Officer, Dr. Jabbar Bennett, to say a word of welcome. Please join me in welcoming Vice President Bennett.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I hope I can say more than one word, if that's all right. But it's truly a pleasure to be here this evening. As you heard, and many of you know, my name is Jabbar Bennett, and I serve as Vice President and Chief Diversity Officer here at Michigan State. And it is truly an honor to welcome you to the third annual Malcolm X Community Forum, sponsored by Muslim Studies. So I want to thank also and just express my gratitude to Dr. Muhammad Khalil and the Muslim Studies program for this event, but also just for the work that you do every day to educate our campus, to raise awareness around campus, and for caring for and loving our students, Muslims and non-Muslims too, because that's what you do every day. So thank you for that. And for those of you, again, I mean, you're aware, and Dr. Khalil stole a bit of my thunder. I wanted to be sure that I said what a special place this was and what a special place in the hearts of Michigan State that Malcolm X has based on his time in Lansing, but also the fact that he stood in this very room and gave an address to an audience like this. And I think we're going to hear some similar comments and some thoughts and maybe some calls to action that I think would resonate even back in the day, too. So this forum provides a virtual space for the exchange of ideas and learning, and as you all know, through the contentious times that we're experiencing across the world and in the nation and on our campus, that dialogue and mutual and sustained and respectful dialogue is something that we could really use a bit more of. And it's really important that we acknowledge Malcolm X and the work that he did, and also recognize the contributions that Black Muslim Americans have made in shaping not only the civil rights movement, but the history of the United States. MSU's commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion also connects to the civil rights movement, because it was back in 1968 when the very first iteration of my office was formed. That was 56 years ago. You all ought to clap for that. Right? What is now known as the Office for Institutional Diversity and Inclusion started out this first iteration as the Office for Equal Opportunity Programs. And at that time, we did a lot of work focusing on compliance, meeting regulations, local, federal, state, and hiring and student recruitment. But now the work expands far beyond that, which all of you know, in promoting education, promoting diversity, inclusion, equity, and also outreach and engagement. Tonight's speaker, activist and former National Basketball Association and NBA player Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf brings a timely perspective to today's challenges. In these very difficult times, as you all know, diversity, equity, inclusion is under attack locally and just across the board. And it seems like these extensions of the civil rights movement in general, many of them are under attack today, which just makes it more important and relevant for our speaker to be here. And I'm so glad that students and employees joined us as well. I am ready to hear the keynote, so I will get out of the way. But what I'll say is I appreciate you being here, sir, and I also appreciate everyone in the audience who's here, but also who joined virtually, just to hear what we have to learn, what many of us have to learn and appreciate, I would say even a bit more about the life, about the work, the legacy, and the impact of Malcolm X. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Vice President Bennett. Now, tonight's community event was made possible thanks to a generous gift by Dr. Mohammed El-Nebtiti. Is he here? I know he was on call. He's a neurosurgeon, so it looks like he was on call. Well, we wish him the best. He's also the father of a Spartan student. We want to thank Dr. El-Nebtiti. We also want to recognize the community member who contributed to our first two Malcolm X forums, or fora, Dr. Iltifat Hamzavi, a dermatologist and the father of an MSU alum. And I think Dr. Hamzavi, I know Dr. Hamzavi is here. I saw him earlier, right there. Yes, yes. All right. I hate to do this, but I have to play the role of salesperson for just a second. If you would like for us to continue holding this particular event, please consider giving a gift. So you can scan the QR code there, and you'll be directed from there. Alternatively, you can always email me. I'm the only Muhammad in religious studies, so it's easy to find me. And thank you so much in advance. Now, this year's event is not just a Muslim studies event. This year's event actually involved, well, many units, but two units at MSU that we worked closely with in making this happen. First, we have the Broad Art Museum, and specifically I want to mention Rachel Winner, and also MSU Libraries, and here I want to highlight or pay special attention to Deborah Margolis. And Deborah does a lot with Muslim Journeys, and this is part of the Muslim Journeys program. At this time, I'd like to invite Rachel Winner from the Broad Art Museum to say a few words on behalf of the museum. So please join me in welcoming Rachel Winner.
Thank you, Mohammed, and thank you all for being here on this dreary but exciting January evening. On behalf of the MSU Broad Art Museum, I'm very happy to be here with all of you tonight. Tonight's program coincides with the museum's exhibition Resistance Training, Art, Sports, and Civil Rights, which explores the way that artists and athletes alike have engaged in questions around social justice. And as Vice President Bennett alluded to, this exhibition also considers these efforts in relationship to the history of sports at MSU. And so I will let you explore all of those connections when you come and see the exhibition, which is on view until February 18th. So come soon. The MSU Road Art Museum is always free, and we are open to all, so come anytime. The exhibition's Spartan Connections, as well as tonight's program, importantly exemplifies the ways that campus partnerships, connections, and collaborations are integral to every aspect of the museum's work. And tonight, these partnerships are what made this event possible. A remarkable 20 units worked together to present this year's Malcom X Muslim Studies Community Forum, and the museum is very honored to be one of those partners. The museum is very much invested in its role as a teaching and learning resource for students and faculty on campus, as well as our friends in the greater Lansing community and beyond. We're very excited for the new conversations that emerge when we work together, and we're very grateful for the opportunity to be a partner in initiatives like this one that help us work together in support of our shared values. I'm very excited to share tonight's event with all of you, as well as future collaborations. But until then, enjoy the lecture, and I look forward to seeing all of you around the museum soon. Thank you.
Many thanks, Rachel. And now I'd like to invite Alexandra Rivera to say a few words on behalf of MSU Libraries. So please join me in welcoming Alexandra Rivera.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here. I am the Michigan State University Libraries Associate Dean for Diversity, Inclusion, and Organizational Development, and I am delighted to be here with all of you this evening. The MSU Libraries is honored to partner with the Muslim Studies Program, the Broad Museum, and the many wonderful co-sponsors to bring you the 3rd annual Malcom X Muslim Studies Community Forum. I'd also like to extend our immense gratitude to activist and former professional basketball player Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf for joining us today to discuss his autobiography. Intellectual freedom is a cornerstone of the society, and it can be found within your library's many resources, services, programs, and in their excellent staff and faculty, such as MSU Libraries' Deborah Margolis, who has led not only the library's engagement with this program, but also readily supports similar programming, research, and information needs of our diverse communities. As a core value of the MSU Libraries and in alignment with the university at large, intellectual freedom is defined by the American Library Association, quote, gives the right to think for themselves, gives people the right to think for themselves, respects individual dignity and self-rule, and allows people to form their own opinions and ideas by questioning the world around them, close quote. The kind of autonomy that intellectual freedom offers is not found in the censorship that we see in condemning acts of peaceful protest, like Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf's refusal to stand for the U.S. national anthem. Libraries maintain a commitment to freedom of speech, religion, and other constitutional rights in support of intellectual freedom, including works highlighting voices and experiences like those of our guest tonight, activist and author Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf. Thank you, sir, for sharing about your own experiences in expressing intellectual freedom, and to all of you for joining us tonight to engage, discuss, and learn from one another.
Many thanks, Alexandra. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank the many individuals who made this event possible. Here I'll mention a few names. First, Mr. Abdul-Rauf's representative, Mr. Hanif Khalil, no relation, sadly. Our administrative lead, Laura Large, our advancement and development team, including Michael Lindau and others, and Joy Chance of International Studies and Programs. I also want to thank Rael Silva for filming this event, Scott Harris from Everybody Reads for arranging the book sales, more on that later, Mudassir Tawakkul for his invaluable suggestions, always, members of the Muslim Students Association, including Abdullah Al-Ijl, Janetta Vitijia, I hope I pronounced that correctly for Janetta, and Zoya, it looks like I didn't pronounce that correctly, I'm sorry, Zoya Malik and others, for promoting the event. They're a big reason we see many people here this evening. And I also want to thank the local Muslim organizations, including mosques in East Lansing and elsewhere, as well as Prince Salas of Lansing First Presbyterian Church and others for spreading the word about this event. I also want to thank the university co-sponsors of this event, in addition to the Muslim Studies program, the Broad Art Museum, and MSU Libraries. The co-sponsors include, are you ready for this? Here we go. MSU Office for Institutional Diversity and Inclusion, International Studies and Programs, Global Diversity, Equity and Inclusion, College of Education, College of Arts and Letters, the Folio Endowed Chair, Department of African American and African Studies, Department of English, Department of History, Honors College, James Madison College, Library Associate Dean for Diversity, Inclusion, and Organizational Development, Residential College in the Arts and Humanities, Global Studies in the Arts and Humanities, Creative Writing Program, Department of Religious Studies, and last but certainly not least, our very generous co-sponsors from the University of Michigan, specifically the Digital Islamic Studies Curriculum, or DISC. And by the way, we have newer heirs here from DISC, and they have a great summer program for those interested in Islamic or Muslim studies, undergrad students. So if you're interested, come talk to me, email me. It's in June. It's totally free. It's in Maryland and at the University of Michigan. And now, what we're all here for. Please allow me to introduce our featured speaker. And actually, let's begin by showing you a trailer for one of the 2 documentary films made about him. And with that, we will pause here for a second.
Please rise for our national.
Let's try that again. There we go. There we go, perfect. Oh, no, you're good, you're good.
Please rise for our national anthem.
There we go.
Please rise for our national anthem.
This Mahmoud thing has really touched on some nerves.
One of the greatest players in history was cheated out of his career.
Hold on, stop. Go back before that, because this is important.
Never saw somebody shoot like that.
Who was this dude torching the Lakers?
He was Steph Curry before Steph Curry.
Quickness and the creative flair he had.
He wasn't good, he was great. It looked like I was watching a guy play basketball.
To watch him have Tourette's syndrome and still destroy the best players in the league.
I could have 9 shots in a row. If there's one glitch in the move, I have to start over. I couldn't embrace success. This is too good to be true. Things like this don't happen to people like me.
I don't think anybody could have foreseen what was about to happen.
I was having issues with my faith. I embraced Islam, and life changed.
I noticed that Mahmoud was not standing for the national anthem.
He believes the flag symbolizes oppression.
Am I saying that everything in America is bad? No. But wherever the bad is, as a Muslim, we don't stand for it.
That's when a lot of people turned on him.
Mahmoud never said, I'm gonna burn the house down, but the Klan burned his house down.
I thought I was gonna die every day.
We should have covered him. We should have had his back, but we didn't.
His willingness to take a stand in an era where very few pro athletes did this. We should be celebrated for that.
All right, now, that was, by the way, the trailer for the Showtime documentary Stand, now available on Paramount+. Last week, we screened another documentary film that I really like, By the Dawn's Early Light, produced by Professor Zarina Grewal. Now, when you have at least 2 documentary films about someone, you can deduce that this someone is impactful. A natural-born leader and competitor, Abdul-Rauf of Gulfport, Mississippi, was formerly known as Chris Jackson before reverting to Islam in 1991. He is a humanitarian, activist, author, former NBA player with impeccable skills, admired by his peers and fans alike, and who is admired and respected for the person he is off the court. Mahmoud grew up with Tourette's syndrome, undiagnosed until the age of 17, and has expressed that he wouldn't be the basketball player nor the person he is off the court if it weren't for Tourette's syndrome. It has also driven him to support mental health causes and initiatives. As an athlete, he set several freshman scoring records at Gulfport High School. He earned first-team All-American honors both years at LSU, Louisiana State University. He was taken with the 3rd overall pick in the 1990 NBA draft by the Denver Nuggets. He received NBA's Most Improved Player Award in 1993, appeared in the slam dunk contest at the 1993 NBA All-Star Weekend, and was one of the league's most accurate free throw shooters. In 2020, LSU retired Abdul-Rauf's number 35 basketball jersey, and in 2022, he was recognized by Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame. By the way, I have to just say as an aside, a few years ago, we invited him into this community. He did a clinic for the students here, the children here, and I swear, he must have made every shot he took. Like every single shot he made. It didn't seem real, didn't seem human. In his unwavering faith in Islam, Abdul-Rauf preaches, the goal in life is to find your gift. The purpose in life is to give it away. This is why today, Abdul-Rauf spends his time traveling extensively in the US and abroad, doing speaking engagements and basketball training, while also partnering with organizations that align with his faith on issues such as education, social justice, mental health, and humanitarianism. Mahmoud says the way we live has to produce a legacy of action which also mirrors the importance of coalition building, which was a primary strategy of our beloved prophet, peace be upon him. He has just released his autobiography with Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Nick Childs, In the Blink of an Eye, published by Kaepernick Publishing. Immediately following this event, copies of the book will be on sale, and Mr. Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf has kindly agreed to sign the books. And now, please join me in welcoming Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf. That's not loud. You can switch to this one.
Can everyone hear me? All right, first let me begin by thanking God for being here. I'm extremely grateful for this opportunity. I always, before I begin my talk, I always laugh when they say I was in the dunking contest, because I could get up, I can dunk, but I never dunked in the NBA game. So I think I made history by being in the dunking contest without ever dunking in the NBA game. Yeah, it was my team's fault for putting me in it. Let me begin by also saying that I want to thank Michigan State University's Muslim Studies program. I want to thank Broad Arts Museum, and I want to thank MSU Libraries for the generosity of thinking about me at this important time in history. A time where our beloved El-Hajj Malik Shabazz, 61 years ago, shared the same space, spoke in this space. So for me to be here in this moment and on this day at this time, I don't take lightly. I'm deeply, deeply humbled. I was debating on how to begin, if I should begin by speaking about the importance of revisiting his history, or how he pretty much influenced me, and then going into that. I was first introduced to Malcom, the autobiography, when I was in college. My college coach, Dale Brown, gave me that book, this white guy from North Dakota who seemed to know almost everybody underneath the sun. He would always give us stuff to read and ask us what we thought. But prior to that, and that was a turning point for me, which I'll get into. But prior to that, I grew up in and at a young age, I grew up with a mother with an 8th grade education. And so even, the furthest my mother could see was getting a high school diploma because nobody in my family ever went to college. But it's difficult. You grow up in an environment without a person that's educated in the formal sense of the word. And so I grew up with an inferiority complex. I grew up looking at myself as feeling inadequate when it came to academics. And so at a young age, I knew, like all young children, they want to be successful in something. So you have to find what works for you. And for me, I knew that I had athletic abilities. I had fast twitch muscles. I could catch on. And so mostly all of the people that you see that are successful on television are the actors, the entertainers, and the athletes. And so this is what I strove for. But I had a lot of insecurities outside of basketball, right? I didn't see a future for myself academically. And so I was that person who would sit in class, right? I would be in the back of the class. I would pray that no one would ever ask me any questions. I memorized very well, so I would memorize my way through school, but I never really learned anything. Never really learned anything. I would just memorize my way through it. And so when I was told that all you have to do is make a C to pass, to play, that's all I was striving for was a C. And so going through that process, and I'm going to just skip a little bit because I know I don't have a lot of time because we're going to have question and answers at the end. I put everything I had into basketball. You're taught not to put all your marbles into one basket. But this is what I did, and anything could have happened. And I'm going to get to Malcom and how his life changed me, but I want to give you a little backdrop of how I grew up and my mindset at that time. And so I would wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning. And imagine a young boy at 9 years old and you feel that, man, if I don't make it in basketball, my life is over. I don't know what life's going to say for me. I got to put everything into this because I was scared and I didn't want to fail. And I didn't want a 9 to 5 either. So I'm waking up and it could be thundering and lightning outside. And I'm not exaggerating one bit. And many days I would come home, like the cold out here, it wasn't that cold, but there was a wind chill that was coming off the Gulf of Mexico. And I would literally be freezing. And I would come back home with frostbitten hands. You're shaking because we were poor. So I didn't have the heavy warm-up suits. I would have shorts on and a shirt. And I'm dribbling the ball up the court. Up the street to get to the basketball court. And on top of that, I had Tourette syndrome, a neurological disorder. It's like your mind and your body on 2 different wavelengths, right? And they're always in negotiating with each other, trying to find balance. And so if something didn't feel right, I had to repeat it over and over again. So to get out the house, it may take 45 minutes. Just putting on your clothes, taking them off, putting them on, taking them off, open the door, shut the door. Going up to the basketball court. I'm 2-3 individual people that I'm playing against. They're always this close. If I mess up, I have to back up where I was going. I get to the court. I have to train, hour and a half. After that, I had another drill that I had to do, and it had to be perfect. And if it didn't feel perfect, I had to do that one, and that one lasts for about an hour and a half. Walking off the court, if it didn't feel right, I back up. I have to do it again. So every day almost was like a near-death experience for me, just to make it in the game of basketball, because I didn't see a future for myself academically. I didn't see where academics was going to be a way out for me. I saw that for me, this has got to be it. This is life or death. I got to make it. There's no other choice. And so as I'm going through this process, we have to, in order to go to college, you have to pass an ACT or SAT. And again, I could memorize. I knew how to read and write. I knew how to spell. But my comprehension skills, my critical thinking skills, terrible. Because again, all I did was memorize. And I can remember missing it by 1 point. And then there was this exception that they gave me. And I can say it now. I couldn't say it then because I would have been red-shirted or disqualified. But they gave me this exception where they put this woman in the room. And they gave me as much time as I needed to get through the test. And she was helpful, to say the least. I would, during the test, and she let me answer a lot of them. But every now and then, she was a genius. I don't know how many she knew, but she would say, you sure you want to answer? You sure that's the answer? And I would look at her, and I'd go read it again. And I knew I got it right when she didn't ask me the question again. And time would go, she would hit me with it again. You sure that's the answer you want? And I would do it again. At the end of it, I ended up passing it by 1 point. So I was able to go to LSU. Now I'm at LSU. I'm bypassing a lot because I want to get to the meat of it. I'm at LSU, #1 guard coming out in the nation. They are asking me which classes that I want, but for some reason, they put me in this room where they wanted to assess where I was intellectually. Again, I've been memorizing my way through school. If I read something to you, and there were words I could spell that I didn't even know what they meant. If I read it to you, you would have thought, man, he's intelligent, until you start asking me questions. And this is what they did. I was in that room, and I've never been so humiliated in my life. And I'm sitting there, and the person is asking me to read, and I'm reading. After I'm thinking I'm done, I done sold it. I sound so good. And they said, well, you know what this word means? I said, nope, I don't. They said, do you know what this word means? I said, nope. They kept asking. The more they asked, the more humiliated and the more embarrassed I felt. And then they asked me, they said, well, what did you get out of the story? I said, I don't know. So here it is. I'm at LSU. This is my first year. To this day, it's been like 30 years. I still hold the all-time NCAA freshman scoring record of 30.2 points a game while at LSU. I was on Sports Illustrated. I was on the cover of Street and Smith's, all these types of magazines. I'm projected, if I want to go to the NBA that year if I wanted to. But I didn't for other reasons. I'm breaking records. People see me, I seem confident. I seem for sure about myself, but there was a lot of insecurities because I knew deep down inside, not even deep down inside, but I knew that there were so many other things that I was incapable of at that moment, and that really all that I really had going for myself was basketball, right? I didn't feel confident intellectually. And the world didn't know that at that time, while I'm breaking records, scoring 50-something a game and 40-something a game and on the cover of these Sports Illustrateds, that they put me in the corner of campus in this small room along with maybe another 5 students. And they had me in this remedial reading class where I had to learn how to read all over again in terms of being able to define words, right? To extract the moral out of the story, to think critically. And the world didn't know that this is what I was going through. And at that moment, this college coach named Dale Brown, one of those days handed me a book that would change my life. And that was an autobiography of Malcom. I never heard of Malcom up to this point, right? And I started to read his book. And at this point is my second year. I'm a sophomore. And I'm reading his book, and I couldn't put it down. And as I'm reading it, the way his mind worked just fascinated me. I'm an athlete, so I'm competitive. I see something in people I like, I want it. I want it for myself. I want that part of that character or that mind. Like, man, how did you get there? And so I kept on reading and reading, and his life just began to fascinate me. And so fast forward, and I went through some changes. You know, that's what information does. it literally sends you through a lot of changes, because I was this really reserved young man. I took a speech class in high school. Don't even know why. I don't want to talk in front of people. Like, what made me get a speech class, right? But I believe that God knew something that I didn't know, that he was preparing me for something somewhere along the way down the road. And as I get to the NBA, I'm going to fast forward a little bit. I meet this guy, and I had questions about my faith. And Islam came up in conversation. And I ended up going to pick up the Quran, and then from there I read about 2-3 pages, and I looked across the table at him and I said, I don't know about you, but my search is over. I said, I'm going to be a Muslim. But that process of getting there, you know, when I think about, as I became a Muslim, I started to reflect on my life, right? Those influences, because they say your environment has a way of molding and shaping you. The people that you come in contact with, the images that you see, the things that you hear, the things that you don't hear, all of those things communicate things to you. So, you know, I'm starting to reflect on my life, you know, like, okay, why did you, Mahmoud, why were you thinking the way you were thinking? Why did you look at yourself, right, as being inadequate? Why did you have an inferiority complex? Where did this come from? And I can remember Malcom, El-Hajj Malik Shabazz would talk about the importance of knowing yourself, knowing your culture, knowing your history. Right? That's I think one of the most dangerous things that you can do to a person is deny them access to their history and their culture and the knowledge of themselves. Because then you become susceptible to someone else's interpretation of who you are, and they don't always have your best interests at heart. Right? And then you're all over the place. And so as I began to think about that, and this is as a result of reading the autobiography, because how Malcolm would just touch on so many things. You know, and we love him, and I love him because he's a reflection of oftentimes our pain and our rage, oftentimes that we don't want to express, but he was that voice that would come out and express it, and he would interpret it in a way that, you know, gave insight to it and make you want to go and move and act upon it. And so I began to look at my life. Now I'm breaking records. I can remember having a game at LSU where at Florida, I scored 53 points as a freshman. And we beat them. I fouled out 3 of their guards. They come and get me for an interview. I'm nervous. I'm doing the interview. I get on the bus. I'm crying as if I heard somebody had killed my mother. I mean, I'm crying, snot out my nose, everything. But why am I crying? You would think this was the happiest moment of my life. Man, you as close to the NBA and your goal as you could possibly be. But I was crying because I was scared. And I said, man, things like this don't happen like this to people like me. This is too good to be true. Something's going to happen to me. Plane going to crash. I'm going to get hit by a bus. Because this don't happen to people like me. Where did I get that from? I can remember as a boy. How many of you ever heard of Sanford and Son and Good Times? And there are many other movies. But as a little boy, I could remember looking at those shows religiously, day in and day out. And as I started reflecting, your environment has a way of molding and shaping you. The things you consume, the things you hear, the things you don't hear about yourself. It is so true. One scene was a junkyard, right? The other was the projects. But they grew up relatively in the same socio-economic background that I grew up in, right? Poor neighborhoods. And every single show, as a young boy, we were rooting for them to make it out the ghetto. Every single show. But every single show, as we're getting hyped, something would happen. They would be so close to getting paid or getting ahead. Something would happen to kick them right back in the ghetto. Every single show. And I'm looking at this year in and year out. And other movies I'm watching. And it's the same old story. And I said, this is why I thought that about myself. This is why I felt that way. This is why I looked at myself as being inferior. This is why I looked at myself as being inadequate. And at that moment, I vowed. I mean, when I said I vowed, I said, I'm not going to die like this. I'm going to live with a free conscience and a free soul, whether people like it or not. And I'm going to work hard to take these shackles and these handcuffs off of me and challenge myself and challenge people. So what happened was I began to read almost anything you could put in my hand. I was on a mission. That same energy I had to try to be the best basketball player that I became, I said, I got to do that with learning. I didn't know where I was going to begin. So what happened was I accepted Islam. And in the NBA, every city we went to, the best education that I ever received. You know, I remember an old guy telling me one time, he said, readers are your leaders, or leaders are your readers. And every city I went to almost, there would be people that would meet me in the hotel. I don't know how they found out where we were staying. But when we got into the lobby, and it would be predominantly Muslims, you would hear from the corner, Salaam alaikum, Ak! Salaam alaikum, brother, how you doing? I'm a people's person. I love people. I love to talk to people. I love to learn. I love to share information. So if I felt good about you, it was a practice of mine where we would sit up all night to 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. And I would order room service. Some people may have been good in history. Some may have been good in political science. And then we started having dialogue. Then they started introducing me to authors and books that I'd never heard of. The Noam Chomsky's, Gore Vidal's, Randall Robinson's, Jawanza Kunjufu's, the Arundhati Roy's. And I'm going to get them. And there was a bookstore in Denver, Colfax, Salam bookstores. I probably bought every book that he had. All right? And I would just read, and I would have dialogue day in and day out. And I remember coming across this book called The Prince of Slaves. You know, have you ever heard of it? And it was about this brother Muslim named Abdul-Rahman that was enslaved in Natchez, Mississippi, which is about 2.5 hours from me. And I began to read about his story, and immediately I got angry. Because as I'm reading it, and he was a captive, and the person who enslaved him knew his father in Timbuktu, who was an important guy, a king of sorts, a leader. And when they finally got, as I'm reading the book, you say, well, where's Timbuktu? I'm reading about Timbuktu. And the images you grow up with about Africa, right? And all of these images, these negative images, which help to formulate how you saw yourself in a negative way. And I'm like, wow, you learned at Timbuktu. Man, it was a civilization back then. You know, they had universities before oftentimes the West had universities. The number one commodity was books. They valued information. So you start learning all of this and you realize, man, if I would have known that at that age, who's to say that my mind wouldn't have been different, that I wouldn't have saw more possibilities for myself other than being a basketball player? And so it angered me to the core, because now I'm thinking, what else am I missing out on? What else don't I know? And so that just put me on a search. Because, and I say that, this is why I say that. I spent my life trying to hone my skills to be an NBA basketball player. I finally get to the NBA. And I was thinking about this when you were talking. I said, if I'm ever fortunate to meet Malcom someday, I believe Malcom going to paradise. I do. We don't know, but I do. I said, if I'm ever able to meet Malcom someday, and I'm fortunate to be by his side in paradise, I want to thank him for sure, for his inspiration and his influence on me as a person in terms of my thinking, in terms of my behavior, in terms of my approach to morality, my approach to social justice, all of those things. But I will probably say to him at the same time, say, man, could you have given me that book a little later? And I'm joking, but I'm serious too. You know, you spend your life developing your skills to make it somewhere. And then all of a sudden you're in the league, you're making all of this money, you're helping people. And I say, thank you, God, for enlightening me. But could you have given me another 5 years to make a little bit more money? Now you want to make me conscious at this particular time in my life, right? You know, so, but I mean, alhamdulillah, it is what it is, and I have no regrets, literally no regrets, because there's a saying, they've done studies, and I truly believe this. There's a saying in the Quran where Allah tells us, be in the company of the righteous, right? And there's a reason for that. When I used to read a lot about Malcolm, and I would study his speeches and all of those things and listen to what he was saying, and I'm observing his mannerisms, his character, how he uses analogies and rhetoric. I mean, just phenomenal human being. As I'm listening to Malcolm and I'm reading his excuse me. I'm so grateful that through him I developed this attitude, because I really believe Malcolm had this mindset that the truth for him meant more than anything, that he's willing to risk everything based upon that. And they've done studies on the human being, and they said if you're not in shape, hang around people in shape. If you're not smart, hang around smart people. If you want to be moral, hang around people that are moral. Why? Because there's a language, there's a lifestyle that they've been conducting for so long that got them to that point. And the more you're around those people, it rubs off. At some point, it rubs off. And for me, that's been the case. And so, not just Malcolm, but through Malcolm, you know, you're on a search for knowledge, right? You're on a search for information, right? You're on a search for justice. No matter, at the same time, we talked about this earlier, no matter who it hurts. It's not that you're trying to hurt people, but you know what? The truth means more to me than anything. And it's going to be what it's going to be. So here it is now, I'm in the NBA. I'm going through this process. Now I'm coming across information that I know I have to do something with. And I'm thinking about those personalities like a El Hajj Malik Shabazz. What would he have done? Would he have been silent? You know, Arundhati Roy has a saying. She says, once you see something, you can't unsee it. To be silent, to say nothing is just as political an act as speaking out. Either way, you're accountable. I said, wow. I said, so once I see it, I'm just as accountable, right, as if I didn't see it. I mean, if I'm silent about it, I'm just as accountable. Once I say, well, shoot, I might as well go for broke and let it all hang out, right? I'm thinking about what Huey P. Newton, because this is what Malcolm was on. Malcolm was on that journey of always trying to evolve. And he was also a person that didn't mind letting you know if he was wrong. We talked about that today. Those are things that impressed me, because it's hard when you're on the pinnacle. You're on this lofty place, and people are looking at you, and you're speaking, and you got all of this knowledge, and then you realize something that you said wasn't the actual thing. And he had the type of mindset and spirit that, hey, I was wrong on that. But he keeps it moving, and he keeps challenging, and he keeps pushing. And so for me, this is what Malcolm, in terms of the influence that he gave. And so I started to take positions. I had to learn how to tell people no. I had to learn how to challenge people and sit with how it feels, that discomfort of people not liking what you had to say or disagreeing what you had to say. And I realized, well, that didn't kill me. And I kept going until one day I'm reading all of this information. I'm looking at what's happening in America, you know, the Noam Chomskys, the normal Finkelsteins. I'm reading everything. And they talking about global and domestic foreign policy, global policy, and I'm coming across stuff I've never heard before. You know, since the inception of this country, they've been at war 90% of the time. 85 people control more wealth than half the population, 3.5 billion people. I'm reading books by Keonji Yamada Teller. I don't know if you know who she is. She's a professor at Princeton. talking about we have 400 billionaires. 400 billionaires of 45 million people, and this is not an intersecting fact, but a parallel fact. We have that number because we have 400 billionaires, because we have 45 million people in poverty, right? And she said profit comes at the expense of the living wage. And I'm reading all of this stuff, and I'm coming across info. I'm like, wow, I didn't know this was going on like this. And so now I'm at the top of my game in the NBA, and they come and ask me a question about America's, the system, American imperialism, the country, and I give my honest answer. And I give an answer based upon what I've been reading that's coming from a world of academics. I'm not an academic, but this is coming from an academic world. They study this all the time, but we don't always talk about it. We see things, and a lot of these conversations we have in the barbershop, we have on the plane, we have on the buses, but yet for some reason we don't want to have them publicly. And this is, for me, this is the thing that kind of impressed me that much more for Malcolm. Because I grew up in the 70s. I was born in 69, so I grew up in the 70s and 80s. So I grew up in the South where the relationship between blacks and whites was in your face. And I saw my mom and my uncles when they would be in private, how they would have conversations. And those conversations would be bold and courageous. But when they had to confront a white person, the head would be down, they would talk softer. And as a child, you grow up seeing that. And it carries over. And I was that child. And I was like, why do I feel this way? I don't like the way this feels. It don't feel natural. Why can't we just say what you want to say regardless? And so I grew up with that all of my life. Right? But I knew, I couldn't put my finger on it, but I knew something was wrong with that. That came from a place. And so looking at Malcolm, listening to Malcolm and breaking down the issues and being fearless, I said, man, I want that. I want to have that personality. And so I focused on him. Just like those studies say, if you want to be something, hang around it. So I started reading. And so now what happened, my heroes changed. Noam Chomsky said, we don't need heroes, we need good ideas. My heroes changed. Now it wasn't Dr. J anymore. I love Dr. J. It wasn't those people anymore. Now it became thinkers, philosophers, people that have pushed the envelope for social change. Now this is what I'm consuming every day. And it's only natural, the more that you consume, the more that you surround yourself around, it starts to affect you. Your cells, whatever it is in your body, you can't see yourself doing anything else. Just like when I would envision making it to the NBA, and I would go out and train, and I would sit and I would meditate and I would pray and I would think. And a lot of the stuff that I thought about literally it developed just like that. That's another story. So as I'm going through this process, these other things are happening. And being in that environment of Malcolm and that spirit of Malcolm caused me to end up speaking my conscience. What do you think about the flag? I said, it's a symbol of tyranny and oppression. I said, am I saying everything in America is bad? No, there's good that exists. But wherever there's bad, even if it's in Saudi Arabia, I wanted to throw that in there because I'm a Muslim, to give balance. I said, we don't stand for it. Even if it's in Gaza, wherever it is, if there's bad, we don't stand for it. We fight against it. Whether you Muslim, non-Muslim, woman, man, injustice is injustice. It's universal. Don't stand for it, period. So I'm having this conversation. I say, God didn't put two hearts in the human being, one for justice and one for injustice. You only got one. So I'm having this dialogue. But of course, the media took it and they ran with tyranny, oppression, didn't focus on the other. Now I'm on a roll, right? Because I'm being influenced by the personality of Malcolm and these other personalities that I'm learning about. And then 9/11 happened. And I missed out on my chance to be in the league for some years. And I just snuck back in. And what do? They come and ask me a question. And I give them my honest answer based upon a lot of the information that I'm reading, and not just mainstream information. and career was destroyed as a result of that. But I remember someone telling me one time, they said, you know, if you're looking at a system and you think the system is flawed, or if you think the system is wrong or unjust, you know, they say your oppressor would never voluntarily give you freedom. You have to demand it. You have to fight for it. But they also said, that if those who you consider enemies of yours are saying great things about you, something is wrong. So I took it as a compliment, because I really believe that. And there's so much we can talk about tonight in terms of Malcolm. Like, even when I think about his speeches that he gave here in Ericson Center, if we listen to what he was saying, and I say this all the time, if we go back in the 50s and 60s, a lot of the conversations, the things that they were fighting for, racial inequality and all of those things, economic equality, racial equality, all of those things. What has changed now? We're having the same conversations. If you take those black and white images on television, and you take the images that in the conversations that we're having in this day and time in 2014, and you make them black and white, you don't hear the sound, you put it on silent, we probably won't know the time we're living in. Probably won't. And so one of the things that also intrigued me about Malcolm, and we don't do this enough, and it may upset some people, but that's okay. One thing we don't do enough, we're constantly going in a cycle, like from the inception of this country to now, right? If we look at a world where we have 85 people that have more wealth than 3.5 billion people on the planet, if segregation now, according to the studies, is worse now than it was then, if poverty now is worse now than it was then, but yet we're still asked to go through the same cycle to bring about change, it's not designed to bring about freedom. It's not designed to bring about change. And the one thing Malcolm talked about a lot, it's criminal. When you talk, nonviolence has its place. I don't even like to use the word violence because it has a negative connotation. I like to use the word armed resistance. But nonviolence, he said, is criminal to teach a man, right? To teach a man not to defend himself when he is the victim of brutal attacks. So when you look at the system, and when you look at, and we talked about this in the car, I think one of the most fascinating things, literally the most fascinating things to exist in the world, is you have a small minority of people that control the mind of the majority, and that will still go in a cycle. Still go in a cycle. They say it literally, mostly everybody in this country is 2 to 3 paychecks from being on the street. Medium income people. We have nice homes and nice cars, but technically underneath all of that, we're on the verge of poverty. They've done a study, European study, that America is now considered a third world country. Over 40 million people or more don't have health insurance. And you have third world countries that give access to that. So how am I to look at this as an exceptional place? Yes, there's good, but there's so much bad, I don't have time to talk about the good. That's my motto, that's my focus. That's what I'm on. Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, that's what I'm on. Because too many people, and this ain't about just black, ain't about just Muslims. Everybody's suffering. Everybody. Even when you look at the dynamics of even if we're thinking racially, if we look at the dynamics between whites and blacks, it said just for a person of my color to reach economic parity, right, with a white person would take 300 and something years because of the generational effects of slavery. There's so much work that needs to be done on so many levels. You can pick any institution in this country. Please do. There's so many books out there from scholars and from academics that's dropping on these things day in and day out.
And there's so many problems, but we continue to ignore it. We don't talk about it. But from my study, from my study of history, this is what I've come across, and this is what I think Malcolm was also trying to say. But when he would say something like that, obviously he's branded as a hate monger. No, it's criminal. Even Jesus, peace be upon him, in the Bible at one time told his disciples to sell your garments and buy swords. But we'll hear the peace-loving, the turn the other cheek. Yeah, there's a time and a place for that. Even Martin Luther King, towards the end of his life, his views changed. He said, I feel that I'm pushing my followers into a burning building. He started talking about the evils of this country in terms of its capitalism, its materialism. Right? People start to see it, but not enough is speaking about it. But through my studies, through my reading, any substantial change that have come about, it's not just through voting. It's not just having emergency meetings and policy papers passed from room to room. You hear a lot of these politicians today. Most every time you look at the news, we have a meeting, convene another meeting. We got this policy paper. We're going to pass this vote. By the time you finish, there's another 30,000 people that's going to be slaughtered. You stalling. You window dressing. Don't go for it. We shouldn't go for it. It's in our eyes. So much of this stuff is in our eyes, but we continue to ignore it. And Arundhati Roy, again, once you see something, you can't unsee it. To be silent, to say nothing is just as political an act as speaking out. Either way, you're accountable. We know these things exist. And it's only when people have stood up, when they had the fight, when they had George Floyd, the murder, there was a lot of protesting. Nothing was done until those people took it a little further and made it physical and jammed that police precincts in the police station. How they tell you, it takes time. We got to pass a law. We got to send it through this measure, this measure, this measure. No, it don't. You can pass it if you want to quick. You can make a change if you quick. You stonewall. You stall it. When they hemmed them up in that police precinct, they passed 2-3 laws almost overnight. History shows us this. When I'm overseas, I don't know how many times I'm on my way to the gym in Greece. They say, hey man, you got to delay practice. But why? They got to protest. They tearing some stuff up at the Capitol building. Say, why? They went up 3 cents on the bread. Huh? Yeah, they don't play. But it made sense to me. Why? The people understood if you go up 3 cents, we don't do anything, you're going to go up 7 cents. Then you're going to go up 15 cents. Then before you know it, a carton of milk going to be $10. But our minimum wage and our living wage ain't going to go up. And we're going to be working 2-3 jobs just to make ends meet. We're going to be living to work, not working to live. They understood that. And if you look at from my understanding, mostly every substantial change that happened, it happened according to what Malcolm said. It's criminal to teach a man not to defend himself. And he spoke about revolution and what it does and what it's involved with. And this country, as beautiful as it is, there's so many problems in it. And one that we hear about every single day that's happening in occupied Palestine right now. Constantly. And you have people constantly having meetings over and over again. Imagine babies amputated with no anesthesia. And mostly women and children are dying. Congo, Sudan, everywhere. And America has its hand in almost every conflagration and war that's going on in this country. So as we're here to revisit Malcolm, Amos N. Wilson says something, and I'm going to probably end. Amos N. Wilson says something that, matter of fact, where is it? I'm going to read it. He said, if our revisiting history, and this is what we're doing, also revisiting the life of Malcolm, his thought, his approach to issues. He said, if our revisiting history is merely an exercise in feeling good about ourselves, then we will die feeling good. We must analyze the lessons this history teaches us. We must understand the tremendous value of studying this history for the purpose of regaining power. If our educating ourselves is not about real power, we are being miseducated and misled, and we will die miseducated and misled. And he also said, to manipulate history is to manipulate consciousness. To manipulate consciousness is to manipulate possibilities, and to manipulate possibilities is to manipulate power. I think about this book by Christopher Ryans. It's called Civilized to Death. Right? We talk about how civilized we are as a nation. And go get the book if you can, if you haven't read it. But he's making the comparison because we're constantly told how he talks about this narrative of perpetual progress. Just because things move forward, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're progressing. He uses dentistry. He talks about a lot of different things, childbirth, and he makes comparisons thousands of years ago to now. And you'd be amazed at his findings. But one thing in particular that he was talking about, there was this group in London. They found some tribal people in Brazil. They took them to London because they wanted to show them, look, this is what I want to convince you and influence you to turn your tribe into a civilization. So when they go there, the guy's sitting in the house day in and day out. So one day he decides to ask the tribal from Brazil. He said, let me ask you something. He said, you leave in the morning, you don't come back tonight. Why you gone all the time? I mean, you don't spend time with your family to build or nothing. He said, man, I got to pay for this house. He said, I got a mortgage. He said, what do you mean? He said, it's expensive. It's like 30-year mortgage if I don't pay for it. He said, well, where I'm from, if we want a house built, we get the community together, we just build it. Now, which one is more civilized? But we've been conditioned to think this is civilized. To have this huge mortgage that you'll die probably never pay. You keep going in debt every single day. They raise prices. It's a game. One person saw where there was a group of people at the house of wealthy people. And they were skinny. They didn't have no food. He said, what are you doing? He said, they got the money. We're trying to get something to eat. He said, where we're from, if people hoard money and don't allow it to circulate, we give them a soft warning. After that, we deal with you. What's more civilized? The society is always more important than the individual. This is my belief. This is what I believe Malcolm's belief was, and all of those people. You know, I remember something that Huey P. Newton said. I'm going to end with this because I can keep going. Huey P. Newton, he has a book called Revolutionary Suicide. And he was talking about the difference between revolutionary suicide and reactionary suicide. In other words, revolutionary suicide, giving your life for a cause. And he said something that resonated with me, and I haven't forgotten. He said, it's not that we have a death wish. This is not the case at all. He said, it's quite the opposite. He said, it's that we have such a desire to live with peace and dignity that the existence without it is impossible. We have such a desire to live with dignity and peace that the existence without it is impossible. This is what my hope is for every last one of us in here. That when it's all said and done, irrespective of our ethnicity, our color, our religion, that when we unpack it all, it's all about really, and I know these are words that people throw up all the time, but I mean really, that it's about justice, it's about equality, it's about fairness. It's like the concept of Ubuntu, where they had this anthropologist created a game among African children, take this tree at a far distance and say, whichever one of you can get to that tree first can have it all for themselves. Because we grew up in that type of society too. We're taught to be individuals. And he thought that they were going to run and get it and keep it individually. But instead, they looked at each other, they grabbed arms, and they ran to the tree together. And when they got there, he said, why did you do that? They said, Ubuntu. They said, this is a psychology among African tribes, right? How can I be happy when the rest of us are sad? I am because we are, right? We're all in this. And I know these are cliches, but it doesn't mean that it's less true. We're technically all in this together. And the more that we stop being silent, the more that we start really thinking conceptually and analyzing all of these things, and I'm still learning. I have a long way to go. Long, long way to go. The more we start standing up and being firm and following through as a collective, then these things will start to dissipate and they'll change. Outside of that, if we keep going through the system that they've created that hasn't changed anything, if you take the black and whites, if you take the same conversation, we're having the same conversations. Things have gotten worse, not better. So why should we still follow the same model for change? It doesn't work. We need a new model. So this is Malcolm's contribution to me as an individual. And I still read listen to his speeches. I still read his books because there's always something still to learn in what he left us. And I'm super grateful to be in this space with you. And I'm looking forward to the questions and the dialogue after. May God continue to bless you. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf. Now is the time for questions. We have some time here. If you want to scan the QR code or go to slido.com and put in that number, you can enter your questions. And we already have some questions here. The first question is, while my phone loads the page here. All right. Let's start from the first one here. Do you believe you got justice for how you were treated in your career?
Oh, that's a good one. No, I don't. It's one thing if, it's kind of like when you look at the situation with Kaepernick, right? I don't think there's anything that I said was untrue. The NBA they have causes that they embrace. And they'll pull in players to support those causes. There was no rule in the NBA at the time. My agent at the time was Sharif Nasir, a Muslim guy. And we looked into it, and they fined me and suspended me because they say there was a rule in the NBA that I had to stand. Come to find out, there was no rule in the NBA that I had to stand. And they just pretty much made it up. Even the guy that fines people, he wanted to fine me $1,000 a sock because the NBA emblem wasn't being shown. So this is a guy, he's supposed to know the rules and everything. And he said, man, there's no rule in the NBA that you got to stand, right? So the fact that they suspended me and fined me, but that's not the worst of it. It's really the after effects. Because it's kind of like what happened with Kaepernick, and the playbook is the same. When they want you out, they know that there are laws that protect you. They can't say, I'm getting rid of you because you didn't stand for the flag. But what they'll do is, when you go to that next team, because there's relationships. We all know there's relationships in business, in the world that we live in. There's cliques. Because Kaepernick and whoever else, I forget his name, they won a collusion lawsuit in the NFL because they were able to find out. But you go to your next city, your minutes decline. When your minutes decline, what happens is now, we don't know if he can play anymore. And so now it's easy to get rid of you based on those conditions. So no, I don't think that I got justice whatsoever. I know there's a reason for everything, and if it's meant to be, it'll be. But also, I'm not depressed. I mean, I'm grateful for where I'm at now. If that wouldn't have happened, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. I don't know that. So I'm just, but no, I don't think I got justice. No, not at all.
Well, speaking of the league, what are your thoughts on current players staging counter-protests in reaction to social justice initiatives taken by a large segment of the league? I'm referring to Jonathan Isaacs and Enes Freedom's actions since the 2019-20 season, who have invoked religion to uphold the status quo and perpetuate oppression. Do you view this as an affront to your and Malcolm's legacy?
Hold on, you gave me a lot.
It is a lot. Let's just keep it the first part of it.
No. Hit me with it again, because I want
to. So, what are your thoughts on current players staging counter-protests in reaction to social justice initiatives taken by a large segment of the league? I'm referring to Jonathan Isaacs and Enes Freedom's actions since the 2019-20 season, who have invoked religion to uphold the status quo and perpetuate oppression. Do you view this as an affront to your and Malcolm's legacy?
Well, the first part of that, it's necessary for anyone, if you see an injustice, if you think something is wrong, to take a position on it. There can be arguments. People are going to have arguments. Look, everybody have to make a decision that's good for them. A person will think about their job. They'll think about their families. I get it. Look, I was married. My wife at the time, when I had the HBO interview was coming, I said, look, I have to do it. I agreed to do an HBO interview. She had that look on her, like she was like, I said, what? She said, why? I said, because I agreed to it. She said, what you gonna say? I said, I'm gonna say what I believe to be true. She said, yeah, but when you give interviews she said, people burn down our house, we don't get no job. And so I looked at her, I said, you know what? I said, I apologize. I said, I apologize to you in advance and my children in advance. I said, but I've grown up a certain way, and I used to be a certain way. And I said, I made a commitment to myself that I want to live and die with a free conscience and a free soul, whether people like it or not. And I said, so I'm apologizing to you in advance if anything comes out of this that is detrimental to you. I said, but this is the man that I'm trying to become, and this is the man that I'm aiming for, and I'm not turning back on that. That was my position, right? Some people may say, look, I want to try this approach and that approach, but I think everybody, just like what I talked about before, silence is not going to help us, right? I think if you see something and you have a heart for it, address it. I really believe that. And I think, and I'm a religious guy, so I believe that anything that's destined for me, you ain't going to be able to keep it from me. And whatever ain't destined for me, you ain't going to be able to give it to me. So this is my approach. Now, the last part of that, I think when they were saying something about perpetuating oppression, well, if oppression is perpetuated, no, I don't agree with that. Then yes, that's an affront to Malcolm and whoever else who fought for those things. But I'd have to have more specifics. I don't know that case with them.
Let's do one more sports question, and then we'll move on. Let's see, what was a good question? Where was it? Oh yeah, how do you feel about youth who look at sports figures as role models or idols?
Just choose a good one. Because nobody's perfect. Look, you have priests that have the cloak on that's committing, despicable acts. You have politicians, you have academics. Nobody's perfect. So, there's this stereotype that, and it's not, that athletes are, not necessarily, you got intelligent athletes. Look at Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. He's a writer, Eton Thomas, right? You got the guy that's a politician that's been for years, Bill Bradley, back in the day. So I think about that. Back in the day, J. Edgar Hoover, now it's declassified, right? Back in the day, J. Edgar Hoover, and I'm just paraphrasing, you had the Muhammad Alis, right? You had people that stood for stuff. You had Paul Robesons. You had a lot of people. They were intelligent. They took positions. And they're made examples of all the time. Well, J. Edgar Hoover came out with, during that time, the COINTELPRO and the decimation of the Black Messiah and all of that, these leaders like Martin Luther King coming up. If you go back and read it, he was mentioning how we have to, I'm paraphrasing, we have to promote pretty much the brain-dead athlete away from the conscientious athlete, right? Because they understood the power, because athletes, not that it's right, but the visibility that sports give you, a lot of these children will listen to oftentimes who they admire in an athlete or entertainer before they're going to listen to a professor or before they listen to their parents. So he understood the power of the athlete, the right athlete. So, promote this one and promote that one. They're not taking a position. They're neutral, which means really they don't stand for this and they stand for that. We'll promote them over somebody that's conscientious, that's going to challenge your thoughts, challenge the system, right? Make you feel uncomfortable, right? You have to sit with that. And so I would say, no, just listen, I wouldn't go against it. I would just, with whoever you follow, just make sure they're worthy of following. Yeah, whether they're athlete or not.
You were born and raised as Chris Jackson. Why and how did you choose your name, Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, after reverting to Islam?
I was in the masjid. The imam and another brother called me into the office. He said, have you chosen a name? I said, no. I said, I only know a few names. And one said, well, I think Mahmoud would be a good name for you. I said, I heard all of them have beautiful meanings. No problem. The other one said, I think Abdul-Rauf would be a good name for you. I said, again, I heard all of them have beautiful meanings. Mahmoud means elegant, praiseworthy. Abdul-Rauf, the servant of the most kind. Little did I know that I'm not good with names. When I meet people, I'm better with faces initially. I'm back and forth in the community 2 weeks. So I hear somebody referring to the guys that gave me the names. Come to find out, the one that gave me Mahmoud and the one that gave me Abdul-Rauf, that was their names. and they wanted me to have their names. And then afterwards, they give me a book on the names. And I'm like, man, y'all should have gave me this first. Because I like the sound of Suleiman. And then I like the sound Mujahid. Mujahid means a striver for truth. I said, man, I could have chosen Mujahid. But the community knew me as Mahmoud. It was like 2 weeks or so. I said, I'm going to just go ahead and keep it.
That period when you chose not to stand for the national anthem, of course, it was before the media ran with it. You had been doing that for some time. Yeah. When the media ran with it, I wonder if you could describe that period of time in your life. Like, what was that like? Did your teammates support you? What was that like?
Yeah, I'd been doing it the previous year for about 4 months. And I never intended for it at that time. Now, yeah, was it going to come out? Yes. I wasn't running away, but I was also still searching. I was still trying to figure out the world around me, right? I was reading things. I'm like, man, this don't make sense. No, I ain't for that. I ain't for this. And so that's why I stopped standing. Because I said, well, it doesn't represent what you say it represents from my studies, right? And so I can't stand for that. Then when I'm reading Quran and Allah tells us he didn't put two hearts in the individual, right? He only put one. You can't be for justice and injustice, right? And all of these other things about our prophet, and then even when I think about Malcom and other people, right? And so I'm like, I can't do it, because it's a symbol to me of that. And I would pretend to be stretching. There were times I would get up and I would face the other way. But the media would say, oh, he would go to the bathroom. And no, I didn't. I went to the bathroom a couple times because I had to use it. But I didn't go because of that. And make a long story short, Todd Ely, the assistant GM, said that there was this radio personality. And he came out on the radio, I think, the Hitman. Actually, it was, and he saw that I wasn't standing. He wanted to talk to me. And I told Todd Ely, I said, look, man, we talk about this stuff all the time. I said, regardless, I said, no problem, we can have a conversation. So after I talked to him, that's when it gained traction. Then the next day we're playing Shaquille O'Neal with Orlando Magic. And I'm thinking, you see so many journalists. And I'm like, well, they're not here for us, they probably here for Shaq. Because that was his first year. And they beeline straight to me. And the first question they asked me, hey, what do you think about the flag? So I spoke my conscience. Because you hear this stuff all the time, right? I mean, you hear even politicians griping about certain things about America. The books, they're out there. So I'm thinking, okay, but the power of the athlete, the power of visibility, the power of influence. But I'm thinking, okay, I'm gonna say what I gotta say, back to the game. I came back to the arena that night. I'm getting ready to get my stuff on. Jim Gillen says, Bernie wants to see you at the end of the office. At the end of the hall. It's okay. And they were looking at me strange. So I go down and say, yeah, what's going on, Bernie? He was the GM at the time. He said, the NBA called. They want to suspend you and fine you on account of you not standing. What do you say? I said, I'm not going to do it. He said, well, they want to talk to you. So they got on the phone and they started having a conversation with me, trying to convince me. I don't remember who it was. I wish I would have been that type of person that wrote down names. But I do remember them trying to convince me, and they identified themselves as Jewish. And again, make this clear. We make a distinction, right? Just like we make a distinction between Muslims and terrorists, we make a distinction between Zionists and Judaism. We make this distinction. That could be another conversation, but in case somebody's, because I mentioned Jewish. But they said, well, we're Jewish, and they gave me an example. And the example that they gave me, I'm listening. And when they finished, I said, well, I appreciate you giving me that, sharing that with me. Thank you. But this particular example doesn't apply to me. I said, so I'm still not going to stand. And it didn't apply because they were Jewish. It's just the example you gave, that ain't what I agree with. And that's when they defined me. And I'm thinking, I've never been fined and suspended in my life. I'm thinking there's going to be an act of Congress. You got to go through a process. So I said, Bernie, can I go get my clothes on? He said, no. I said, I'm suspended right now? He said, yeah. I said, well, can I go put my clothes on and sit in the arena and root for the team? He says, no. He said, they don't even want you on the premises. So that's when I left. And then before you know it, I look up. It's global that fast. It's all over the world because this young little black athlete who happened to be a Muslim said something about America. Not that it was wrong what I said. They just didn't like the fact that I said it. And so let's make an example of them. It's kind of like what Noam Chomsky talks about, the threat of a good example. So we crush you, we're going to send a message to everybody else that if you do this, same thing going to happen to you. So be careful. Right? And you see this played out a lot, like even with when Westbrook and James Harden was in China with the Uyghur situation. And they said, well, we're progressive, the NBA, and we allow our athletes to speak out. Yeah, it depends on the politics. And so they were getting ready to say something, and somebody from the NBA said, no, you're not going to answer that. I said, I thought you allowed your players to speak out. But it just depends on what they agree with and what they don't. You want to try to control your voice.
We have time for a couple of questions. First one is, when you did finally stand, and you would stand and make a prayer, dua, an invocation, do you mind sharing maybe what you would pray for?
It would vary, because I was reading a lot, right? So, like now, what's happening in Gaza, and what's in the Congo, and what's in Sudan, and then just the everyday problems that's happening in this country. A lot of times it just will be a general, oh Allah, please allow us as an ummah, right, to develop tawheed, to unite with your oneness, eradicate poverty, bring enlightenment to people, to see the truth, to expose falsehood. Depending on what I was reading, I would just pray for those people who were going through challenges and suffering. But mostly it was in line of eradicating, oppression, bringing about universal justice because we always gonna have it. We know that life is just gonna always be that way. But for the most part, put a major dent in it and expose those people that need to be exposed. Yeah.
This will be the last question. A lot of questions here mentioning the horror of Gaza, what's going on in Gaza and elsewhere. How do we oppose injustice and still build a sense of community across our country?
I think they go hand in hand. I think there's no cookie-cutter approach. Every community is different, every person is different. But the fact that you're opposing injustice, I think once you oppose something wrong and corrupt, eventually other opportunities and other scenarios will develop, right? And it becomes, what's the word? Not like a domino, but a ripple effect. You know, but I think the first stage, you know, it's like sometimes I have these conversations and you have people, well, you know what, I want to learn all that I have to learn. I want to learn as much as I can. I want to know everything before I move forward. Well, you'll never know everything. That almost assures you're not going to do anything. So my approach has always been whatever little I know or think I know, I'm going to move on it and God's going to show me the rest, right? You're not always going to have all of the steps there. But if you know that this thing right here I need to oppose it. And then along the way, you may, this comes up and that come up. That's how a lot of things happen. Like even talking to people that's in social organizing and movements. Some of them didn't even know. They said, man, we did this. They said, we found out this, and this is how this organization was evolved. And so I would just say the fact that you know there's an injustice, take a position on it. And this is what I think hinders us a lot, because we're thinking too much of A, B, C, D, E, F, right? And suppose, no, I'm just going to do this, and God, you show me the way. Yeah, I don't care if it's small. Show me the way. I did that, right? And I'm seeing it happens all the time. So, no, I don't think that it will, I think they go hand in hand. I think they go hand in hand. There's more I can say. But that's one aspect of it. I mean, you definitely want to, it's nice to have knowledge, to have insight on things, because some people will just do something because I know this is wrong. So the more knowledge you have, obviously, too, and you're constantly, I'm big on reading everything I can, because I've learned over the years that there's an intersectionality. I know that's a word with information, right? Sometimes you realize that, I think what's his name talks about this in his book, Paul Gatto. He has a book called The Underground History of American Education. And he talks about how a lot of times subjects are so separated, like they don't make the connection. Like if you're in this political science and if you're in this class, how do I study this material and make a whole lot of them? Things are so compartmentalized, right? Where you can't see how they apply to each other. And it's no wonder why you have so many people with great ideas, but then they don't know how to put them together. Like, man, they got a great idea, but they don't have no follow through. And a lot of that stuff comes from, because we're not all educated the same, right? And we don't all learn the same. So there are methods. And so I think, me personally, I think that has hindered a lot of us. Like me studying history, and then me studying political science, and there always seems to be disconnected. So you grow up, not knowing how to put things together. And he talks about that in his book, Why Are Things This Way? Like you should show the intersectionality, how all of this stuff comes together as a whole so you can see the full picture. And so this is a part of our problem. I may not be expressing it, articulating the way I want to, but I think it's important to start looking. I would tell my children, teach me something I don't know every day. And I would tell this one, give me something in history, give me something here, give me something here. And we always try to say, okay, now how can we make sense of all of this stuff? How can we pull it together? So I think that's important also. But at the end of the day, if you see something and you know something needs to be done, just do it. And trust that along the way you'll find the next step to take.
I could keep going. Thank you so much.
No, thank you.
Thank you so much. Please join me in thanking Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf. Thank you. So this concludes our formal program. At this time, we will be doing book signings.
Can I say one
Yeah,
thing?
one more thing. Well, we're not done yet.
Every 90-some% of the time when I can remember, 90-some% of the time, I read a lot. If you have any, please, any book list of you think that that'll be interesting reads, I don't care what subject it's on, I don't care if it's one book, give me that list of that book, because I go get it and I read it, and that helps me along the way. So, and I'll give you mine too, if you want it, but please, give me a list of books that you think is good for me to read. I don't care what subject. It could be quantum physics, even though I don't know anything about it. I'll read it. I'm telling you, I'll read it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And now what we'll do is we'll set up a couple of tables here for book sales and book signing, and we'll go from